Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, realignment behind closed doors. Brett Yormark cooking his own kind of cobbler, complete with a bonus stroll through the tunnel of memorable middle fingers. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you once again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen every day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. So head to FanDuel.com/Locked On and make every moment more with FanDuel. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you once again. And as we reconvene, we are on the cusp this week of probably some interesting things to discuss because Big 12 leadership is going to be convening. You've got Big 12 meetings happening. You're getting comments from SEC country as they convene as well. Movers and shakers are moving and shaking. We'll get to a couple of things on today's episode as it pertains to the Big 12 Conference, Chris, and of course, added partners out there, whether full-fledged, like, say, I don't know, the Colorado Buffaloes, partial membership, like, say, I don't know, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, or anything in between. But this is always an interesting time, Chris, because we'll get much more information, I think, rolling out than just with realignment issues. That'll be a primary topic of conversation, I'm sure. But we'll begin to get some kickoff times. We've seen that elsewhere across the country and a whole lot otherwise coming out this week to discuss. And a lot of it, of course, hitting home here locally for Texas Tech.
Yeah, I think you've got some league meetings going on around the country. The SEC is doing theirs, and they're talking about, do we play 8 or 9 conference games? And there's a lot of media attention on that. And then obviously the Big 12 is got theirs going on, and up in West Virginia at a resort up there, and you've got all basically the commissioner and his people, and you've got all the school presidents and athletic directors. So really the decision makers are in one place, and it's, and other league business will be talked about and discussed and decided on, but really what has pushed its way to the forefront is expansion. And I think it really, we've heard bits and pieces throughout the last 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, and all these things. And I think it kind of, again, shifted into overdrive in the last 24 hours with the report out by Dennis Dodds about Colorado and having, a lot of talks, I think substantial talks. I think, you see the word, imminent or, and I think people are starting to talk about it a bit differently. I'm still a bit uncomfortable with how public this is. Because it may be, you just don't know if this is warning shot, like, hey, Pac-12, you better get it together. This is like your fair warning, because, there's some of those dynamics that you're just not real sure. So you have to be careful about buying into. But I do hear that there's real possibilities here. And I think that I was told, Calvin, and I think you and I have talked about this. Speaking of just Colorado in general, I was told back during spring football, during that time frame, I had heard from somebody that would absolutely know, before I had really ever even thought about it or heard that, because there was so much focus on, the Arizona schools and maybe even Utah and all that. Colorado was just one I just hadn't given much thought to. And the point was made to me, hey, Colorado's the one that's really receptive to this. They are engaged with us. They are talking. It's meaningful. And then I fast forward to like the report yesterday, and I believe all of what was reported to be very, very true. And I do think they are heavily considering a move. I don't think it's necessarily a warning shot. we can get into some of the financial components here, but I do think Colorado is maybe at the front of the line on teams that would say we will accept. We don't maybe even need to see what the Pac-12 is offering. We may get to a point where we accept. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if Kate Upton's offering you a date, do you check with your current honey for a counter offer? If you got one, it's bad, I suppose, and maybe some of you out there do. I know there's some very handsome folk in the Locked On Texas Tech audience.
Did you think less of Kate Upton after she hooked up with Justin Verlander, and I guess they're living happily ever after? Did you think? Do you like Verlander?
I have no opinion on Verlander really, but a supermodel he is not. So no, I thought more of Kate Upton because I think it should just give all those non-handsome members of the Locked On Texas Tech audience hope, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, as we always say, man, keep hope alive. And
that's exactly right. Yeah. Chris, we are so far beyond like fair warning or even final warning time. I mean, what are we doing? I think we are at the precipice here of real movement. You used the word imminent. We've seen the word imminent used in some national reporting. And it only makes sense that you would see some real movement one way or another. Either the Pac-12 and its leading institutions or most visible institutions saying we're good and meaning it by signing things and agreeing to things. They've already said we're good. Of course, that doesn't mean anything, but saying it and then backing it up with actual agreements documented, like attorneys in the house. Is it notarized? Did you get it stamped? Possibly. How official can we make it here? When we get to that point, possibly you see resolution that way. Nobody believes it's going that way, but that's one option. The other option is you get on the move. And, as a Texas Tech fan, I'm just laughing thinking about all the things we've lost entertainment value-wise from our former schedules in the fall or even on the hardwood as well. The baseball diamond, whatever it might be. And Colorado is what we may get back. Gee, thank you, football gods. Colorado, where they could put together a flaming bag of dog crap that hadn't won a game in 18 months and still beat you when you go to their – I mean, Colorado has been a nightmare for, I think, Texas Tech-wise. Correct me if I'm wrong. You've smacked them around every once in a while. But, man, I remember some of those years where it's like, Colorado is giving you fits or just outright beating you. You remember there was this bullet point whenever I think Tommy Tuberville got a win in Boulder, Colorado, if I'm not mistaken. If you're like, well, Mike Leach never did that. What? We must be on the right path now. It was kind of a thing that Colorado was a pain.
I'm trying to remember if this was 2006. We could go back and look it up on when you went to Boulder. Mike was the coach, and it was an uninspired loss. And the team buses would sit there loaded up, minus the head coach, for I think what would be 30 minutes to an hour, just sitting idle with engines on and all these things. And Benny Wiley, the strength coach at the time, would exit the bus, one of them, and go into the locker room and find Mike just sitting there pondering life. And just was frustrated and in disbelief and trying to find an answer. But that's one story for you to your point. I mean,
he's probably thinking, man, the Rockies are right there. I could be on a kayak in an hour. Maybe I should just leave it all behind. 2-10, the Buffaloes were that year. I'm looking it up. You're an even-handed 5-5 all time against one another, but that 2-10 team in 2006 you're talking about, and 30-6 was the final score. Was that where we got the West Texas high sign there? Somebody flipping the bird at the Colorado crowd, I think an offensive lineman possibly. Do you remember that at all once upon a time?
I remember Jonathan Gray years ago. Well, no, was it? Yeah, I think that may have been the right name. Big giant offensive line. I think that was in Lubbock,
Huge
though.
man.
Yeah, that was in Lubbock. I think when that happened. But
I
yeah,
thought we had a Boulder finger flash at one point in time,
there
but again,
there may have been. If memory serves, I think you're. Now I remember this against. When Tech was playing Missouri, maybe, and Graham Harrell maybe was involved in one of those. With
Graham
the
was
crowd.
enthusiastic. He was
Yeah,
passionate about
he
football.
didn't. Yeah, he had thrown it to the other team a few too many times, and it was a Chris Todd moment. Man, we're just getting
Oh
in the
no,
whole memory thing here.
I remember that one. Oh, I love it. Even though these are painful memories, but hilarious now in retrospect, and kind of hilarious at the time. I was in the section that Graham gave the double birds to after back-to-back pick sixes. I think not just picks. I think pick sixes went the other way. I was in the section with the date, and I told her we're about to get to meet Chris Todd, ladies and gentlemen. We did for a brief period of time, and then of course the story rolled on. But yeah. Tommy Tuberville went in 2010, 27-24, went over the big bad Buffaloes there in Boulder. And we thought, well, this really isn't that much. I don't know why we're getting that excited about this. Speaking of retrospect. But as we broaden now, Chris, and think about, okay, you're considering Colorado as somebody that really, truly, and you said this a month ago, keep an eye on Colorado, and then national things began to pop up, keep an eye on Colorado. So we're keeping an eye on freaking Colorado. Do something, Colorado. Do something. You're the thing where I'm poking you with the stick. We're a meme right now. Do something. But somehow, Chris, it seems like now what has come to be the most likely possibility, or maybe the most feasible or realistic of the possibilities, is with a Colorado launch. Somehow that's paired with action from Arizona. Are you buying into this at all? Because I'm seeing this more consistently probably than anything. What do you think about the pairing? Because it's not just going to be one. And does it stop at two, or is that 4 scenario out there? But first, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book and the official sports book of Locked On. And with the NBA Finals here, FanDuel is upping the ante. And if you've never gotten in before, now is the perfect time, because new customers get set up with that no sweat first bet. Now $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet don't bank. That's $2,500 back to you in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So go now, download the FanDuel app from the App Store. Safe, secure, easy to use, and get your first bet in with the no sweat first bet. You're always paid instantly with FanDuel, and there's no better place to get all your bets cooking than with America's #1 sports book. So head on over now to FanDuel.com/LockedOn and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. That's FanDuel.com, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. What do you think about the pairing? Because it's not just going to be one. And does it stop at 2, or is that 4 scenario out there?
Yeah, anytime we get into any of these kinds of discussions, it's like one answer leads to a variety of other questions, and I have the same questions that you do. I think because if we go back to like the finances, this is all about a fit and mainly it's about money. There is some thought out there that there is a number that the Pac-12 is starting to hear that this is what they're looking at. And and I can't suggest that it's true, so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But I think without that being officially presented, I think there's some thought that Pac-12 decision makers have heard enough to know this is going to be kind of the range of money we can expect to get if we stay where we are. And I think what you have with the Big 12 is that they can offer you, a full share of what they've already signed off on. That is already in the contract. They've already got it ironclad as far as from their TV partners, that if you pull a existing Power 5 member, they get a full share. and that number is just under 32 million, and that doesn't count playoff money and NCAA tournament money and other monies that you can generate via your conference tournament or whatever else. Okay, so
yeah.
And I think that the Pac-12 folks, let's just speculate, they may have heard something in the 20s that they feel fairly. So what Colorado is having to consider is, do we sit here and wait? I've got a bird in the hand. And I think the Big 12's problem is you really have to let them wait. You're not really going to pull their offer. You're not going
Right.
to – you can't move them off their spot. You can't threaten them with Gonzaga or Yukon or whatever because – and so that's where we're getting into this kind of this rub and the timing of everything. But, Casey, to answer your question, it just took me a second to get there. I do think – that's what was hard for me to process is that there is very clear to me that there's data in place from consultants, from somebody that the Big 12 is listening to that is telling them of these four corner schools, if you will, that Colorado and maybe Arizona is the tops, but then Colorado is next. Those two are the ones that you want.
Yeah.
And I think Phoenix, market, Denver market, I don't pretend to know all the households and the data and eyeballs and brand and all that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously Arizona is a big basketball school, but I do think, because I have the same question. If Colorado were to say, if we were to get off this podcast in 5 minutes and we see, oh my gosh, Colorado is a Big 12 member, my question is, okay, what next? And I would definitely be looking at, okay, now does this cause anybody else to get, now they're down to 9. Can they keep it together? Now, now is it worth as much as it was, or is it even worth less? And that's kind of because, again, You're looking at a bird in the hand over here. You've got a full share, and it sounds like Brett Yormark only wants to really consider going to 16, Casey. So,
Yep.
I don't know. But I would, I think you're reading the tea leaves correctly. I think Arizona would be next in line, that everybody would be looking for some sort of statement from them going, okay, where do you stand? And I think that I'd be very curious in that answer.
I love what you said earlier in that every answer just generates more questions,
Right.
Because that's exactly what just happened to me. Because you consider the thought of, okay, one team leaving the Pac-12 conference, say in Colorado, does that destroy the Pac-12? I'm not so sure, because there's a San Diego State edition still kind of lingering out there that may, for the time being, they're already destroyed. They don't even know it, I guess. But for the time being, they probably do. They probably do. Deep down in a place, talk about it, parties. You know the reality. But San Diego State, some BandAid on this gaping wound, is still out there. I think if there's one departure for the Pac-12, 2 exits, I don't know. I think maybe then you see the mad scramble, and that's what could lead to the 4 additions for the Big 12 as opposed to just the 2. And we are rolling in the realignment tinfoil right now. I understand the speculating that is going on. But, yeah, I'm not so sure, Chris, if I'm seeing more of the kind of scenario I described there, where there's one exit from the Pac-12. Maybe they got a Band-Aid for the time being to hang tight without Colorado. But that still leaves the Big 12, if it's only one that's coming over, that still leaves the Big 12 in a situation, I believe, of also thinking, well, we've got to make another move, or there's got to be another addition to pair with this. And I think that's when we get back to some of these interesting conversations about like a Yukon full membership potentially, or what was thought to be a Gonzaga partial membership. But am I hearing correctly that apparently it is being pressed upon the Big 12 that, no, we'd like to be a full-fledged member, all sports on board if we're coming? Where does the Gonzaga factor weigh in, and what's it looking like now?
Yeah, I think because I wonder if somebody from the Pac-12 moves, where does that leave these other options? Like, are they still back burner, or do you go, okay, let's go ahead and offer one of them. So I don't know. That's all. And again, we don't know. I would guess that the decision makers and Brett Yormark and those folks, they would have an idea of what they could get done, ultimately what they want to get done. But I think the rub there with Gonzaga or with Yukon, maybe I think Yukon is much more palatable as a full-fledged member than
Right.
the Zags are, just because there's no football program to offer up. And I think what the folks in Spokane want is they are interested in becoming a member of your league and bringing all their sports. I think Brett Yormark and Big 12 folks are much more interested in just basketball. And so is there a deal to be made there? Does it make sense? What do the finances look like there when you don't have football, and that's where most of this money is being generated from? So lots of questions there. Are the Zags only a factor in some sort of, if we can't tap into the Pac-12 scenario? In other words, if you just get a bunch of no's and the Pac-12 comes up with a short-term agreement and they just kick the can down the road, at that point, do you move to, okay, now let's go in all in on basketball,
Right.
or can Gonzaga and a Pac-12, situation be meshed, like we're saying? In other words, Colorado and the Zags. Okay, now we've got our two. I don't know, but I think that not everybody's on board with all sports from Gonzaga being a part of the Big 12.
It just escapes me as to how a basketball edition, if that's your bread and butter, and I even said this about Yukon, and they have a freaking football program, like Chris just outlined.
Went to a bowl game last year.
Right. They'd be a much more palatable, full-fledged edition as compared to someone like Gonzaga. I don't know why I'm putting on airs saying Zaga again. Gonzaga. I could see Spade from where I grew up. It escapes me how, Chris, a basketball forward member can ever add enough to the pie to take anything out when you're not adding anything on a football front. And that kind of goes for Yukon at the same time. I said it the other day. I know it seems like a slap in the face that a reigning national champion would have an eyebrow turned up at them, as a member of any conference. But basketball does not spin the wheel. I'm sorry if that's a shock to your reality. And shout out to the Yukon fan who was in the YouTube comments catching feelings over those comments of mine last week. Thanks for stopping by. But I don't know
what?
how.
Somebody got
we had a Husky out there that was a little upset that Yukon wasn't just being groveled over as a Big 12 member on Locked On Texas Tech, at least. But we appreciate the view.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
But I'm just saying it's the reality. I don't make this reality up. I mean, I guess I did because I love watching football, so I contribute to this phenomenon known as it making the world go round as far as college sports. So my bad. Yeah. Hope you haven't ever watched a football game, or you're to blame also. I just don't get that. Where is the math that says that is going to be good for the Big 12?
Yeah.
You're adding nothing to the pie that actually feeds us. And I'm back to Gonzaga here. I mean, Yukon, again, you at least have a football program, so we'll see. But back to Gonzaga here, or a partial member school. This could go for anybody, I guess. How are you going to add anything to the pie that actually feeds us when you don't even have the ingredient that makes the pie, that being a football team? I don't get it, Chris. We've questioned, again, additive or dilutive to the league for so many who are like already in a Power 5 even in some instances. You want Washington State? No, not really. They're not going to add anything to the pie either, and they're a Power 5 program right now. It'd be kind of funny to see like ESPN, because you're talking about these ironclad agreements and you're referring to the television partners. And if you add a Power 5 member, this is the escalator here, basically, where you're going to be making more money. Like, when does the line get drawn by the network to say, no, Washington State, that's not a Power 5 anymore. You can't just add these bums and we're kicking in, 15 million or whatever it's going to be, because that definition is kind of a moving target, I suppose. But it's got to be exhaust all Power 5 options. We talked about this with the ACC the other day as well. Anybody you could look at and say it's not a hand up. It's somebody that's making a hand for the league, with all due respect to Bulldogs, Huskies, or anybody else out there.
And there's got to be something. I'd be willing to bet, and we haven't really seen this reported yet. But there's got to be some intimate knowledge of the television contract that Brett Yormark has recently, signed and agreed to. Several months ago, that there's got to be language in there, just like we're talking about. If you add a Power 5 member, this is what they get paid. There's got to be some basketball verbiage in there about what a member like that would pay out. They have to know those numbers. I'd be shocked if they don't. Right. This is a bit outside the box, but I'd be willing to bet that he's such a basketball, because I think you talk about piece of the pie and they're not bringing. I think that Yourmark, in some ways, one of the options he's trying to create here is let's reinvent the pie. Let's. Again, we've said this before. You can't be the SEC or the Big Ten in football. That is going to be set. The money that they're going to make is astronomical. But we can tap into maybe something different. And I'm really good at this. If I'm saying Brett Yormark, I mean, he's like got the NBA background and all those things. I
like that analogy, and you're making me very hungry. Maybe we're like a cobbler.
Well,
pie, we're a cobbler.
I heard a saying one time. It probably fits here, but it's similar. It's like it's not. It doesn't matter if your glass is half full or if it's half empty. You just have to figure out who's pouring the water, and that and in this case, he knows his TV partners. He knows if he can tap into some sort of maybe untapped basketball revenue and maybe do some things that I don't know. I mean, and so I just think that he's earned. He's earned the respect of being outside the box, and he was tasked with, your job here is to keep this thing together, build it, and create revenue. And I think that, so it tells me he knows something. Now, again, not everybody is on the same page with all this stuff. And one of the points I thought about Colorado that was made yesterday, and this was reported, and I think this is when it's starting to get fairly. I don't know, imminent or it becoming very real, is the fact that it's been reported that Deion Sanders was involved in some sort of conversation and has said, thumbs up, like, this is what I would prefer, or, he wants to get Colorado back into the state of Texas. This is all football mindset here. And so I think for it to kind of reach the football coach, which, again, there's a lot of buzz there. You can thumbs up him, thumbs down him, whatever. But, I mean, there's a lot of buzz there. They had like, 40,000 plus at their spring game? And then like 2 days later, like I think that many people left the roster of Colorado, and they're still recovering.
Take a player home with you from the spring game.
But if you're involving your new football coach in a discussion about conference preference, that tells me a lot. And I think right now he's got as much stroke in Boulder as he ever will have initially. And that they inquired, or that tells me a lot. And so you put the bird in the hand scenario with, just under 32 million. I don't know, man. Maybe we are on the cusp of the first move here for the Big 12, adding something for the next wave of realignment.
College football is dilated. We're expecting a birth here very soon from the left coast, and maybe it could start with the Buffaloes. What a painful thing to birth, a buffalo. Good night. Ralphie. That's a little bit of a Freudian slip too, because Charles Goodnight saved the Buffalo in the greats. There was one of a few. Shout out to Chuck and the Goodnight family, which I know is all on our minds every day here in the great state. Chris, I just feel like partial membership out there from a basketball standpoint has got to be based on things that are wildly unknown to us and to the general public right now. I like the way you described that right there, and I think you're on the money with a lot of that, because we don't know. I don't know, at least. I have a relatively decent feel for what most will look like athletics department to athletics department whenever it comes to the revenue bus. The football portion of the chart is very, very high, very, very high. The men's basketball portion of the chart is possibly above water, probably less than 5 nationally. who are represented more there on the men's basketball front than the football front, and that's about it. So I wonder what that looks like from a conference revenue perspective. Where is your football number? Where is your men's basketball number? And how do those stack up to other leagues? Because that's not something I have a good feel for. And that is something clearly that when you're Brett Yormark and thinking about maybe basketball only additions, you've got a feel for and then some. So I like the way you describe that there. And I think you're probably touching on some truthful things as far as that reality is concerned. And I'm trying to go Brett Yormark now and reinvent the pie, reinvent the cobbler, reinvent dessert. Are we on a fast? No, we're eating, baby. No, yeah. I'm thinking like Gonzaga. Can you borrow Boise State's football program? Just kidding, Boise. Let's not get them stirred up in Idaho. But who can you go out there and make a partnership with and say, hey, I think if we pair up here, boys, maybe we can get in to the Big 12 conference. I guess anything is on the table, and you're reinventing the pie as it relates to Brett Yormark comment. Maybe as apt of a description for Mr. Yormark as anybody's given, because I guess expect the unexpected is kind of the theme, right? With some of this stuff, takes some getting used to.
Yeah, I think so. I just think there's got to be something there. I just don't think you're exploring some of these options as public as it's been, unless it makes sense with what he was tasked with, and that's generating additional revenue and trying to, again, he's going toward his background. That this is what he's an NBA guy at heart and a big boxing guy and all these things. And I think he's about pomp and circumstance, which who doesn't love, pyro and pomp and circumstance and all the bells and whistles, man. I'm here for it.
We're talking.
Yeah. That's P.T. Right. Barnum, Vincent K. McMahon. I mean, all that. Sign me up. But I think we are like, because I was asked yesterday about, okay, we hear the word imminent. You kind of okay, having serious talks on that. Like, what is a real timetable? Are we talking hours? Are we talking days, weeks? Still months away from somebody doing something? And it's tricky because I think people have just kind of generally said midsummer. Well, you're on the cusp here of the month of June. Mm-hmm. Midsummer to me would be mid-July, but I think that there's a few deadlines in place. Like, in other words, by the end of I think it's by the end of June, San Diego State, if they don't bow out of the league that they're in and join a new one by that date, I think that like anything like into July, their exit fee triples in cost. It would be very cost prohibitive for them to have to, exit. Not that you can't do it. I'm just saying that there's right. some weird deadlines here that I think you can kind of follow, but it just appears that, we're getting closer. I just don't know if this is tomorrow, if this is in July, if this is, I'm just not real sure. I'll be, once all these meetings conclude, I think you'll kind of get a better feel for where things stand, because, and I think you'll get a better feel for the basketball only, because I'm sure I could just picture, because I think President Skuvanik and Kirby Hocutt and various tech representatives are up in West Virginia as it relates to these Big 12 meetings, along with every other. And I'd be willing to bet that Brett Yormark is making his pitch. Guys, here's what we have found. Here's what this is worth. Here's option A through G. I don't know how many different scenarios that could be in play. And I think you're looking to your board of directors, if you will, to talk them into it and explain to them why and all those things. And I just we'll get a good feel after these meetings conclude on, kind of what they signed off on and what they didn't. But right now it's going to be sit tight and wait until these Pac-12 schools decide what to do, because those are the ones you want. You can get Gonzaga or some of these other options at any time you want. Yukon may not necessarily, they may not want to do it for different reasons, but you get what I'm saying.
And I don't know how to process how I feel about the meeting in West Virginia. I think the ACC was like on an island in the Atlantic, last I heard, and the Big 12's in West Virginia.
There's an unbelievable resort up there. Like I think former presidents have stayed at. I think like it's I think it's I need to go look up the name. It's not. I don't think it's anywhere near Morgantown. I'm not sure exactly what city it's in, but I think it's fairly prominent, fairly famous. I think I want to even say that some NFL teams have actually rented out this resort and had like training camp up there. I don't think I'm making that up. I don't know. Maybe I need to hit the Google machine later. And
part of me wants to embrace it. Like,
but no, 12, I get
Big
it.
12's like, we're meeting in the mountains. We're the Heartland Conference. We're meeting in the mountains.
They should have met in Boulder.
People. Right, just like rented an office building overlooking the CU administration building.
Looky there, yeah.
Just constantly looking out the window with some binos. Hey, we're here. We're watching. Giving them a call. Do you know where your football program is? Things could get very, very entertaining here very, very quickly. Okay, so there is something nice there in West Virginia. It wasn't just that the Cocoa Cave was booked up here in the LBK. I wasn't quite sure, but maybe someday Big 12 meetings coming to the 806. Chris, I think before we get out of here, before we're done this week, we'll have kickoff times to talk about. Will we get some clarity on some scheduling things for Texas Tech, or is that another week or so away?
No, I think you're going to get that in the next the next time that you and I speak. I think we will have those. Some of them.
Good deal.
I think that's part of some of these meetings. That's part of TV selections. That's I'm not sure what other bits of news that you will get actually, because I think that one of the next things too is basketball schedule. That's kind of one of the next things that's on the cusp. But I think you're going to get some national TV times announced for Tech's football season pretty soon. Yes.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have that to discuss and more. So be right back here for the next edition of Locked On Texas Tech. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. And thanks to the everydayers making us your first listen worldwide, even intergalactically. Chris, enjoyed it as always, man. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. We'll do it again tomorrow. We'll talk kickoff times. It's not super newsy, but I just love because it makes it real and it lets you know that this is getting close now. Now we know when that ball is getting kicked in the air, man, on some of these nights, specifically that Oregon game. I hope it's a night game. But we get it.
Yeah, and we're all just chomping at the bit to get to bitching about that first 11 a.m. or just give me that 11 a.m. or I know what to do after that on this here microphone, and we'll do it with you on the next round. So looking forward to seeing you then. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for joining us again on Locked On Texas Tech.